Hello and thanks for tuning in to interest.co.nz. I'm Janae Tibshirani and today I'm back with the BNZ Chair in Business in Asia at Victoria University, Professor Siah. How are you going, Siah?
Good. Thanks for inviting me again.
Thank you. Look, Moody's on Wednesday downgraded China's credit rating for the first time since 1989. It raised concerns over rising debt and slowing growth, saying government reforms underway aren't doing enough to get the balance right. So what I'd like to know is why Moody's has made this call now. I mean, rising debt and slowing growth is nothing new in China. What's been the catalyst?
Well, it surprised everyone, and I'm equally surprised as well. I think it's interesting to see that, it's adjusting according to realities, I must say, and debt issues in particular, and the fact that the Chinese economy has slowed down is not news to us. It's probably predicted about 5 years ago. So I think it's probably an internal kind of adjustments that they have to make just to reflect for their investors or investors that relies on Moody's ratings. As opposed to the fact that, oh no, China is actually jumping down again to another notch. And I suspect that that's not the case. We know that it's actually declining, but has been stable decline on many grounds, but growing stable, right? And according to the Moody's rating as well, they actually have better outlook in terms of putting it from negative to being stable.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so while it's downgraded the rating, it's actually changed the outlook.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of the fact that this is no real surprise, it's nothing new, do you think the impact will be pretty tempered then as well?
I think the impact is pretty tempered, and in many ways, if you think about what the Chinese economy is like, so government and business are linked together, right? So in some ways, basically, business fronts for the government and sort of government fronts for the business, but that's because they are also state-owned enterprises mainly.
Sure.
And as a result, that model seems to be putting the macro aspects of the environment with the business environment together. Now, that's very different from where we are, right, in terms of business and government as separate entities as well.
Sure. Okay, and that actually brings me to my next question. Given the sort of business government is so interlinked in China, do you think that does actually give China right to dismiss this Moody's downgrade as it has, because really it's operating on a different page?
I have no idea why they actually need to react. Maybe they were asked to respond, but I think, if you think about it this way, now China needs to do a lot of internal reforms, and that's understood. Now China's growth will always slide down because it's getting bigger and bigger. We don't expect America to be growing at 5% anyway, right? So America has been growing about 2%, so why can't we expect China to be growing from 6% to 5% to 4%, right, roughly there. So we expect that to happen, and we actually want them to actually spend more space and time and money on reforms. There's no way to constantly just grow without doing the reforms. It's very unstable as an economy. So we actually want them to do it that way. And I think a lot of people understand that, but jumping in to respond to say, look, we shouldn't be downgraded is not necessary, because I think Moody's is just adjusting to reality in the past 5 years as opposed to now. This is the new industry standards whereby we gauge China. This is not the case. Okay,
so you believe China's growth does need to slow, and particularly because the growth has been so largely based on debt. I mean, that's been the model, hasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So politically, that seems like a tough issue to handle. Can authorities in China really sort of talk about slowing growth as a good thing?
Well, in the last 1 year, you don't be surprised, in a couple of cases in big sort of meetings, in international meetings, right, they have flagged the fact that the world cannot rely on them for all the growth. Right, because, for example, last year they contribute to about 1/3 of the world's economic growth, and that's quite stressful, right? If you actually one country contribute to 1/3 of the world's economic growth, that's quite stressful, and they have flagged that. But it's interesting also that maybe it's the mentality or trying to be sort of contributing a lot more to the world's economic growth and trying to maintain a status on its own beside the America, right? So just to do that, I think they were trying to grow at the same time just to keep up the world stage, their place in the world stage. And I think it's very stressful in that way to try to do that. So I think they should be allowed to grow slower, but I think they are also trying very hard to please everyone by growing faster and faster and trying trying to maintain that 6 point something growth, which I think is going to be tough over time.
Okay, and in terms of the debt, do you think that Chinese authorities have their handle on this? Because this is the really concerning thing, is this debt, which is around 260% of GDP. Do you think they are actually working on bringing this down? Are the reforms working?
Well, a lot of this money is probably more internal than external. So in fact, as much as we think that might, Moody's adjustment might affect investors thinking about China, but at the same time, a lot of borrowings are happening within China itself. So I suspect that they must have some ways to manage, and we must trust that they have foreign reserves of more than $3 trillion as well, and domestic savings. The last time I checked is close to about 30 trillion savings, and that's the part that I think they are trying to boost up the economy by having things like the capital control, right? To which they suspect that while at the same time when they try to boost up their domestic consumption by asking citizens to release their savings. But unfortunately, when they release their savings, these savings leave the country.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's where you have this capital control since, especially getting strong since 1st of January this year.
Okay, so the money is in China. It just needs to be released internally.
Precisely.
That is the challenge.
Right, and that's why the debt level is super high, because of the fact that there are money in China, but these are not owned by the government. These are owned by individuals who actually save a lot. So 40% of income are saved in China. So that's a very high percentage, and they are owned by individuals. So basically, the government is trying to get the individuals to sort of help out in that sense.
But how do interest rates fit into that? Because my understanding was interest rates were on their way up. So that doesn't really.
But interest rate is also not very high in China, unless you put a fixed and long term and all sorts of other things. But I think the main worry in their case is almost like, it's not people don't spend money much in China, but when they actually go abroad, they buy property and everything. It's like once in a while you spend 5 million yuan just to buy a house, say for example in Auckland and in Wellington. Yet for the same 5 million yuan, you can actually push up the economy quite a lot, right? In particular rural areas and so on and so forth. So that's the reason why the capital control has been in place, and also they are concerned that money is not coming in and the debt level keeps going up at the same time.
Okay, so those capital controls, they seem pretty integral to solving this issue. So you think they're there to stay for a while?
They are there to stay for a while, and more criteria are being placed in terms of what you can bring your money out of China for, right? And then of course then the banks are being watched as well, right? The banks has been warned that they must not relax any criteria, and in fact beyond a certain amount of money, everything needs to be signed off by the central bank.
Right, okay, so that is something obviously really relevant to New Zealand, because that affects our property market largely, and I guess also other types of investments. So something to keep an eye on. But we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much for your time. Always good to catch up.
Right.
And I'm Janae Tibbs-Shirani from interest.co.nz.